Welcome everyone, and apologies again for my late arrival. I wish I'd kind of designed it as an example of something unusual and spontaneous that might happen that delayed me coming here, but sadly I live on the coast, and the coastal traffic today and the town traffic coming here into Louth was horrendous. I really hadn't anticipated it, and certainly hadn't put a risk assessment in place for the traffic volumes today, which is leads me quite nicely into what I'm going to talk to you about today. The other situation I'm in today is I've come from my house on the coast to a house in Louth to do my work today for you. This means that over the last, this is a house I own, I'm the landlord, and there's a vulnerable family who reside here. So I've been used to visiting the house to care for them, and I normally come, as I did today, wearing a mask and bringing my hand sanitizer in case I have any sort of spontaneous or impromptu contact. And frankly, for the last 11 weeks, because we locked down early in this house and my own house, I've been doing exactly the same. We kind of created a sterile barrier before the government guidance around our homes and our vehicles, so that we've been pretty much COVID secure for the last 11 weeks. So it might seem a bit strange that I'm still continuing with these protocols as the government are lifting, but we found these have worked for us, and we're not going to change now. So firstly, I think I'd like to, as I go through the slides, let me just change the slide here. I think I have to get rid of the screen thing there. Firstly, I'll tell you a little bit about me. Juliet kind of touched on it earlier, but I had a full career as a police officer. I enjoyed about 90% of it, and I've lived to tell the tale. Most of my early service was in central London, so I went through a lot of the pain of the 1980s and 90s, and in a lot of those incidents and events, things changed very rapidly as the events changed. As you can imagine, you know, you get called to a hoax bomb or a real bomb situation, and you're immediately on alert looking around for things that haven't necessarily been pre-planned. A good example was Oxford Street, John Lewis, where Pyra put a device in the shop and then also put a device at the evacuation point, because in those days people used to evacuate straight out as if they were doing the fire evacuation procedure. So we were often tested and had to come up with different methods of dealing with what should be fairly routinely risk-assessed situations, but we were caused to think on our feet as their tactics unfolded, so our tactics had to change in response, often at the time, without any previous discussion. I became a promotion selection designer, and this was my first look at the sort of theory around critical incidents. In the Met, we used critical incident analysis to promote our leaders. So basically what we did was we put them through a sequence of exercises. They'd be locked away virtually for a day with different critical incidents to deal with, and what we call paper feeds, where we just slip something in the room that would try and throw them off kilter. And within that day, they'd also be interviewed about what they'd just done, and also about the competencies that we expected them to demonstrate. The idea around critical incident analysis for promotion is that if you promote your leaders that can deal with critical incidents quick time and make the right decisions, then business as usual generally comes easier. So it was about getting people that could think on their feet, and we'd give them business usual tasks to deal with as they went on. And I think largely it was successful. I mean, you know, most of the police leaders I worked with, my colleagues and my seniors, had been through this process. So it seemed to work quite well as far as we were concerned at the time. After another period of operational work, I became training manager for Specialist Crime Directorate. And this was a kind of a new field for me, in that I was now mixing with forensic scene examiners, coroner's officers, family liaison officers, surveillance officers, and managing their training for them. in a variety of scenarios, and some of those included the sort of forensics that we're looking at now, the transfer of sort of microorganisms, and in their case it was, you know, bodily fluids largely that were transmitting these organisms, and aerosol spray obviously within the in certain situations. So it was the first time I'd sort of encountered that as a science type thing. But as this COVID crisis unfolded, I soon realised that the sort of knowledge and skills I put away for now have actually got some relevance, and the combination of skills, which is quite unusual even for a police officer, could be quite relevant. So in 24th of October 1999, PC Kulwant Sidhu died. This was a pivotal moment for the police. Kulwant was chasing a burglar over a rooftop, something we all hope to do when we joined when we're 19. We want to be chasing burglars over rooftops. That's what we kind of joined for, many of us. But sadly, he fell through a part of the roof that wasn't secure, and he fell quite some distance and died. At that point, the health and safety executive looked at the police, and in fact they took two police commissioners, Sir Paul Condon and John Stevens, to court on the basis that we hadn't got adequate safe systems of work in place for chasing burglars over wet, slippery rooftops. The two commissioners were acquitted, but we decided that we had to introduce some risk assessment training to the Met, some formal stuff. We've done lots of stuff around incidents and pre-planned events and stuff, but we hadn't done anything around fast-changing environments, specifically for particular roles and responsibilities. So that came in. I was a training manager already, so it fell to me to help design and deliver some role-specific training. That included, went forward after the 7/7 bombings in London, I trained community engagement officers who were exposed to potentially hostile communities and environments in dynamic risk assessment training as well. And in 2011, I retired from the police after 31 years and went freelance for a while. One of the freelance opportunities I got was to go to Somalia and inspect the police force there. That in itself was a dynamic risk assessment continually from the moment we stepped off the plane to the moment we boarded the plane again. So I learned a lot in Somalia, not only about my own safety, but I had to actually instruct those around me who were there for my protection into how to react as well, which was slightly bizarre considering they're living in a hostile environment. 2016, for them, I designed a forensic cross-contamination training. They hadn't even got fingerprints, so we were looking at quite basic stuff around scenes of bomb blasts, IEDs, and crimes in Mogadishu. The transference of forensic material from one scene to another hadn't really occurred to many of them, not because they weren't smart enough or scientific enough, they just didn't have the capacity. An IED would go off in one part of the city and they'd literally have to sweep it up, deal with the bodies, deal with the injured before another one would go off somewhere else. And they were very much chasing their tails with no capacity. Then April 2020, I was about to launch Space 22, but February 2020, the COVID infections came in and I paused my workspace and thought, what am I going to do during the lockdown if I can't do my workspace? And here I am now. I'll just move this on. So the first slide I'd like you to look at is competence. It's something that is something we kind of take for granted. We take the word for granted. The Health and Safety Act talks about a competent person to assist with risk assessments, for instance. It doesn't talk about a qualified person, it talks about a competent person. And in your business, you could be that competent person. And if I take the driving analogy, for instance, when we're unconsciously competent of something, we don't know what we don't know. So before we do at the moment now, it's an online hazard perception test. We don't know much about hazard perceptions in a vehicle, perhaps, especially my son didn't know nothing. And then when we don't get into a car, if we've not been into a car, we don't know what we don't know about driving a car. And then gradually, as the lessons go on, and we'll learn how to do our hazard perceptions, we start to realise there's more to know. So we're consciously incompetent. We're not able to practice it on our own yet, but we're aware that we need to do more learning. And then conscious competence, of course, is when we know what we're doing and we know we're doing it well. And that's the place where most people are when they're doing something they're expert at, because they're thinking about it and they're discharging it competently. Unconscious competence is a nice thing to be able to do. I can drive my car most times from my house on the coast to the house here. It knows where it's going. It seems to know the road quite well. Today it didn't know how much traffic there was going to be, so I was a bit incompetent there. But generally, I don't have to think much about how I drive my car. But that's a dangerous, as I found out today, a dangerous place to exist in. I should have thought today, for instance, about the extra traffic, because the restrictions were lifted yesterday, or many of them. So, and I didn't. And more people are going through from the coast today, but I didn't. So I should have been in that conscious competence area, and to sort of make an example of myself, I'd slipped into unconscious competence. And it's a dangerous place to be. So as a sort of risk assessment trainer, I'd be asking people to very much try and stay in the conscious competent area. I hope that makes sense. And if anyone's got any questions about this or anything else as we go on, then please ask them. Right, I'm here really to focus on one of my pet subjects, which is dynamic risk assessment. It's something I've touched on in my introduction, and it's something as a police officer I've been doing since I was 19, but only since 1999 have I had any training or trained others about it. So it's a continuous process, and it's the same process as pre-planned risk assessments and health and safety plans go along. And I know we've got some health and safety trainers and practitioners in the room, and it's basically hazards, risks and controls, but on a quicker cycling basis. So basically you've got changing hazards, so you do a quick risk assessment and you implement additional controls, but you do it at quick time. And often as a business owner, it'll come down to a gut of benefits and risks. What's the benefit of doing this and what's the risk of doing this? And it can be sort of captured in that really. And often it'll be that kind of instinct you have. It's your business, you're the expert in your business. What's the benefit of implementing this and what's the risk if I don't? And that it can be really as quick as that. Excuse me. So a risk assessment is, excuse me, I'm just going to move my screen around here. Something's in the way at the top. Risk is assessed before, during and after the crisis. Now the note I've put on here is about token paper exercises. We've all had those in our workplaces. We used to have reams and reams of stuff in the police that was just done once a year, put away, and no one ever thought about it for the rest of the year. A dynamic risk assessment can't do that, and it isn't that. And in the present COVID crisis, with the government guidance changing almost daily, in fact, I read something this morning, literally a paper that was written today by the government a guy that does really high level stats, talking about the testing results not being fit for purpose. So that information is coming into the public domain today. So that really could affect us as businesses as well. If we're not given the proper information, the proper data, then we have to reassess our risk. It's changing rapidly and can often be confusing. I don't know anyone that I know, and I've spoken to lots of people on webinars, that hasn't found the last couple of weeks quite confusing. And it's not because people aren't smart. It's not because people don't know what they're doing or don't know what their businesses are. It's just that there's some conflicting guidance out there at all levels. And then it caters for the unpredictable and uncertain risks, like me being stuck in traffic today. I catered for that. In fact, Marta catered for that. Marta, who's running the slides, she called me and I was still in the car. I was just about to call her. Luckily, she called first because I was hands-free in the car, and I was stuck behind a tractor, then a bus, and then 2 HGVs, all of which wouldn't have been on the road. Well, maybe one of the HGVs would have been last week. So it's about unpredictable, uncertain risks that will crop up. As a business owner, you can flex and you can change the way that you approach those risks. At the moment, we've got what's determined a serious and imminent risk. Serious and imminent is as high as it goes when it comes to health and safety. Serious and imminent is as high as it goes when it comes to policing. So when we've got those kind of risks in the back of our minds, and you're then charged as the business owner to deal with them, then it can feel quite a weighty responsibility. And that's what I'm here to kind of go through a bit with you today. And then it provides a framework and consistent approach, which is what we want. If we can hang something on a model rather than just making it up, then often it goes a bit better, especially if someone else has done some of the thinking for us beforehand. So there's several levels of risk management. What we're hearing every week now every day at the 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock briefings is our strategic level of risk management. So the strategic level is World Health Organization, European Union, SAGE, government. It's that kind of high level stuff that we really don't have much influence in as individuals, and is imposed on us, and hopefully takes into account all the science and all the risks that are out there globally and nationally. The bit of a sticker for this government is the fact that the UK has devolved into the home nations, and so people in Scotland and Wales, for instance, on the mainland, have got slightly differently nuanced advice and guidance. And the number of times I've heard, well, if I'm in Wales and I drive to England, or if my farm borders Scotland and England, you know, I can do one thing in one half of the farm and one thing in another. And that, in this crisis, I think is a particularly irritating situation for many people, I think. So it's those complexities that we hope our strategic leaders will overcome for us. Then we've got a systematic level of risk management, and here we're down a level, and we've got the Health and Safety Executive, PHE, you know, Public Health England, who we hear a lot from, the NHS, we've heard a lot from doctors and scientists, and then you've got professional bodies, unions, local authorities. And one I've come across now that I'm following is the British Veterinary Association, BVA. I'm finding their advice really quite useful at the moment. They've been discussing the cross-contamination from cats to humans, domestic cats to humans, and even discussing whether or not COVID can be transferred by aerosol spray from cats to humans. And at the moment, the jury seems to be out, although because they're saying there's no direct evidence, there's obviously some kind of concern going on there that I wasn't aware of until I looked them up. So there's all these different systematic. The other thing that I'm a bit kind of interested in, and I know there are some health and safety people in the room, is why the Health and Safety Executive haven't been into any of these briefings yet, unless I've missed one that they have. I've missed a couple. I'll try and hit them all, because we're talking about workplaces now. We're not talking just about medical arenas and care homes. We're talking about ordinary workplaces where the Health and Safety Executive have responsibility. And I, for one, I know I'm a health and safety nerd, but I, for one, would like to see them in those meetings and allow people to ask questions. So hopefully we'll see that develop at some point, unless I've missed one. Right, and dynamic risk management is where we come in at our level in business, or as individuals, like I've done with my vulnerable tenants. You know, I'm in an unusual position that isn't catered for here. No one said if you own a house and you can use an office space in the house with the Wi-Fi, because I must admit, The reason I'm here and not in my house on the coast is because we've locked down there. I don't have Wi-Fi. I just hotspot on my phone, and we tested this system with Juliet and Marta, and my phone hotspot wouldn't support it, so I've made a point of coming here. Dynamic risk assessment involves me visiting family here, and that's not catered for. So we have to make these decisions ourselves. So are there any points or discussions for discussion so far? Has anyone got anything they'd like to ask or say?
We've got one question in here, Tony, and it's from John, and he's saying, if dynamic risk assessment is conducted by all personnel, isn't there a danger of too many cooks? Yeah, that's a good question. We certainly got that in the police. You know, if there'd be half a dozen of us in a unit, and we had to make our own minds up, then there could be a danger of too many cooks. What we hope is, in a small business, is that there should be 3 people involved if possible. One would be the business owner or someone managing the business, because they're the expert on the business. One person could be, if the manager or owner is not a health and safety competent person, then the second person would be a competent person for health and safety reasons. Someone that knows a bit more. There's someone that's probably made a point of finding out a bit more, or it could be someone that's brought in from an outside health and safety specialist company to be that person. I know there are a couple in the room today, so it's those kind of people if you haven't got that expertise within your business. And then the third person is often what I call a critical friend. So it's handy to have someone that maybe doesn't know much about health and safety or the business, but can just ask that question. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. So yeah, it can be too many cooks if you let it be too many cooks, but I'd still reckon if I was doing a quick risk assessment now on my premises, again, and there was a new risk I hadn't catered for, I'd consult at least 1 or 2 other people. So I hope that kind of helps from my point of view. Right,
anything else?
Thank you. No, that's it at the moment, Tony, thanks.
Yeah, okay. I'll carry on then. So I mentioned the strategic risk assessment, that level, and this is the government guidance that was out there when I wrote these slides. I think it was about a week or 2 ago. So this may have been updated now with a bigger list. I haven't looked at it this morning. So they're already looking at specific sectors and providing strategic guidance for specific sectors. And we kind of know what that is. Wash your hands, hygiene, distancing, one-way systems, that kind of thing. And if anyone shows any symptoms, then they should go home and self-isolate for 14 days. The stuff that's really getting in the normal kind of vocabulary of the population now, whether we're business owners or members of the public. So that's the strategic stuff, the high level stuff, but it doesn't tell us about necessarily our own particular circumstances, like mine today. It doesn't tell me about a co-working space. I can pick a bit from the offices, and I can pick a bit from gyms, because I've been looking at gyms as well, because they're membership spaces. And I can pick the best bits that fit, but it's down to me really to do that. Public Health England systematic guidance is slightly different. They're obviously concerned about health, not necessarily how people work, the safe systems of work, and they're there to look at preventative measures as well as things like adult social care and health on transport and collective things. And we've heard a lot of those from those at the 5 o'clock briefings. The other thing, obviously, the big one at the moment is sampling and diagnostics. The testing regime is the one that's in everyone's minds at the moment. How's that going to work? Is it working? Is it going to work for me? Is it going to work for my business? What does it do to my business if someone in my business tests positive? What does it do to my business if someone outside my business tests positive and they are traced to someone in my business? You know, am I going to start hemorrhaging staff if the people in my business all socialise together or all one family group? You know, and it's those kind of things that PHE England are there to look at. Another systematic group, and I've mentioned already, is the Health and Safety Executive. They've got some good PDFs at the moment, and I've listed a couple up here. There's more on their site. Go to their link, and they're updating their news regularly. And their stuff is still reasonably high level. They haven't done yet what they've done for a lot of other hazards controls and risks, in that they haven't gone down to a lot of detail in a lot of areas, because, as everyone keeps saying, it's an unprecedented virus, it's a novel virus, we still don't know how it's mutating, and we still don't know all the people that are at risk from it and how seriously. But they've got some high level stuff in there that's worth drawing on now if you're thinking of opening your business now, alongside the PHE England stuff and of course the generic strategic stuff. So the dynamic risk process, touched on earlier, this is the process. So we have to evaluate the situation. So we've already got a high level government stuff, we've already got the systematic stuff going on, and now we've got a situation where we've been asked to open, or a situation where we're already open and something happens that we haven't planned for. So one of the things that I've done in my guidance is just declare that the situation might change. So manage people's expectations by saying, we're not in control of this, not all of it, and we're doing what we can, but we're responding to a dynamic situation here in two ways. One is dynamic in that the virus is still in the community and moving around, and the other is it's dynamic because the guidance we've been given from above is changing as well. So I'd make this clear, you know, just let people know we're doing our best, we're all in it together, and it can change. So you've got to select your safe systems of work using all the information we've got here, and the guides and expertise are out there and they're developing. And if you're not sure, and you've got a health and safety firm near you, or someone you know, or someone that's recommended, most of them will give you tips and advice over the phone. If you need something written down, some documentation or something for you, or a site visit, then they're obviously going to charge you for that, because they're businesses too, and they're businesses that are running their own safe systems of work, so they're learning all the time as well. So use everything that's available within your means, is my advice to small businesses, and get as much free stuff as you can, obviously, but also get as much value out of what you have to spend. So assess the chosen systems of work. So you pick your system of work, whether it's operating a till behind a screen, with hand gel available, I'm making this up, hand gel available, and passing and a card reader instead of handling change. So you select your safe systems of work if you're in retail, for instance, using all that, and then you assess it. So yes, so it's not just about dusting it off and saying that's it. Keep it under review and keep an eye on the changes to what the government are calling COVID secure standards. Yeah, this is going to be a term that health and safety will adopt soon. I think they have already. Boris mentioned it a couple of weeks ago for the first time. It was something health and safety adopt soon, and it will become like display screen equipment, or I think, or what's the other one? Manual handling, where you have to learn to pick up a box at work, that kind of thing. We had to do all that. For us, it was handcuffing people safely, or hitting them safely with our batons so we didn't kill them, or spraying them safely and keeping us safe with the. So we had slightly different ones, but it's all the same safe systems of work. So, and then what I'd say then is introduce the control measures you think you see fit. So so this is about you being the business owner and you being the expert in your business. Yeah, no one else knows your business like you do, and no one's got a monopoly on good ideas. So introduce what you want. There are some businesses now, big and small, that are implementing temperature monitoring. If they're big, if they're big and they've got lots of resources, they can do this externally and they can check everyone's temperature as they walk into the building. If they're smaller, they could be just asking staff to monitor their own temperature, or maybe have some kind of regime where people ask each other, you know, what their temperature was today. Supply them with little temperature thermometers if you want. I'll put staff declarations in there. I think the conversations are going to be important now between staff and business owners, more so around health than they've ever been. So, you know, I think it's a question of encouraging a culture now of trust and confidence where people aren't embarrassed to talk about their health. It's one of those sort of British taboo things, I think it's probably international as well, that we don't tend to talk too much about health, you know, or our toilet habits or our whatever, our other parts of our lives that people don't find that interesting. So I think it's one of those things where we're going to have to talk openly more. And I've included it in my protocols for Space 22, that culture of caring really for each other. Instead of just, how are you today? All right, it's going to be a bit more than that, possibly. So then, as I said before, reassess the systems as you go along and as you get more information. For instance, a couple of things that have come in recently that were kind of not dismissed but kind of shelved were loss of taste and smell. This came out really early on in the COVID science from other countries, and the UK kind of left it to one side, but it's actually in there in the significant symptoms now, alongside temperature and cough. So that's changed. And then use of face coverings is another one. You know, I showed you mine earlier that I bring in here. People do look at me a bit strangely. They have been for the last 11 weeks. But you know, it's a dynamic risk assessment I've made to protect the people around me, not to protect me, but them around me. So it's that kind of thing. Keep that under review. Let's move on. So this is a dynamic risk flowchart I nicked off the internet, and I kind of regret now nicking it because there's an arrow here going the wrong way. From are the risks proportional to the benefits? The arrow should be going to proceed with tasks, I think, rather than away from proceed with tasks. So basically, this is a dynamic risk assessment chart that explains what was on the previous slide. And the idea with dynamic risk assessment is you create loops of reassessing, and where you hit a no, you reassess again. You don't just sort of come to a conclusion, dust it off and leave it, think the job's done. And as I said earlier, for us as business owners, it often just comes down to, are the risks proportional to the benefits? Benefits for small businesses include monetary benefits, because it's a bit like the Disability Discrimination Act, where if you're a small business, you don't have to put a lift in to take people from the ground to the first floor if it would be disproportionate to the size of your business and your outfit. You can actually just create a disabled space on the ground floor. And it's a similar kind of philosophy in my view, in that we decide, is this going to benefit everyone? Is this going to benefit the business? And are the risks proportionate? Provided you've taken into account the strategic guidance, the systematic guidance, yeah, then it's down to you to think about that one. It's not for the government to decide risks and benefits for you precisely, providing you're in line with their strategic guidance. I hope that makes sense. And I think we'll make these slides available if people want them, if they're worth anything to anyone. Anything here, Julia? Any points for discussion?
Yeah, we do have. We've had a couple of questions in from Philip. Well, he's put his hand up as well, so I'm just going to unmute him so he can ask you his question. So, Philip, there you go. I've unmuted your mic so you can ask your question directly to Tony. Thank you.
Hi. My question was, I'm actually consulting with a small company in Leicester that's part manufacturer, part office and design space. And quite clearly, I'm banging on the managing director about workflow, etc. But two areas of concern. One is, should we be having electronic temperature checks on all staff walking into the building and just recording it? As you quite often see in Asia, And secondly, should everybody really be wearing a mask, particularly in the design area where it's very difficult for the designers not to be 2 meters apart if they're looking at design and the product. Sometimes it's fine in meetings where you can be in a boardroom and separate, but actually in a closed office, it's a lot harder. So they're just sort of 2 areas I was thinking aloud and asking that question.
That's a great question. I think on the first one, the temperature thing, I think I touched on it just now. It's going to depend on scale, really. Do you know how many employees are coming in and out of the building every day?
About 30.
About 30. Okay, so that's a good size of people. I think I've seen the Asian airport situations, and even shopping malls now. They're having them in shopping malls as well. These temperature checks. They're more for sort of. I see them more as a sort of herd thing. I hate to use the term herd in this again in the same context because they're a kind of a herd thing and picking people out of a herd. And what they do is, as far as I'm aware, is they check the average temperature of the herd of people, crowd of people, and they pick anyone out that's significantly above the average temperature.
I'm in this case talking about a handheld thermometer against each person, right, and gradually checking each morning as they come into the building. Just A, for their own benefit, and B, for the staff's benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the handhelds I've seen, you can literally touch the skin with them, I think, or go near the skin. And I think even the technology.
Well, no, you don't. It's an infrared. You point.
It's a what? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a what? Sorry, on that one.
It's an infrared, so you just an infrared one where you point it towards the head.
Yeah.
You can buy them now online for about £30, £40.
Yeah, I've seen them.
And it's absolute, it's a way of checking the temperature. Yeah, it's okay. It's really what I'm trying to do. Small steps, but showing you're doing enough to really protect management to sort of say, yeah, you are caring enough about the staff.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a non-invasive thermometer, isn't it? And I'm considering in my space. My space is going to be fewer than 30 potentially. In fact, with the distancing, I'm probably going to be down to about 12 maximum of members, and they probably won't be all in there at the same time. So I was thinking of issuing them all with a digital thermometer as a thing. But if these things are £30 and accurate now, and they can do 37.8 on a digital with no skin contact, then that sounds a good product to me. And I tell you what, I'd endorse that absolutely. It sounds spot on. Scalability wise, it's a very small price to pay for trust and confidence. So personally, if I was consulting them, I'd probably go for that. As long as it's needed, as long as the science says that the infection's out there. The other what was the second question was? What was the second question? Just remind me.
Masks. I mean,
masks. Yeah, well, I'm an advocate of masks when I'm likely to be less than 2 meters, or by chance I might be less than 2 meters away from someone. In fact, I tend to wear mine now when I'm driving in case I have a chance encounter, and I did the other day. A cyclist fell off his bike, an old guy fell off his bike within my vision, and being a first aider, I stopped to obviously check he was okay, and I had my mask around my neck like I did earlier when I came in here. I wasn't wearing it in my car, and it was handy to have it there. So I think there's two things I'd look at. One is your close proximity within your office space, where people are within 2 meters of each other. Then the guidance at the moment, even from the government, is if that's going to happen and it's likely to be more than 15 minutes, then you're not safe. From aerosol spray. That's the guidance. I've been wearing mine in supermarkets where I know that some people are going to be nudging me out of the way to get to the displays. And so my big supermarkets around here, and we're in a low infection area around here, but I've still had the habit of wearing it. Now, because I'm caring for some vulnerable people, I tend to have it on me anyway. So I'll be supplying masks in my space if the virus is still out there when I open, for sure. But for me, there's a wider thing, and I'll come on to it later, about the population of your workforce as well. Do you secure the workforce, like with the temperature checks, or do you secure the space that you're operating in, or do you secure both to the best of your ability? So for me, there's a kind of a wider discussion with my members around obviously encouraging them to come forward if they had any symptoms or they've been any symptoms. And I think track and trace, if it comes in effectively, will be doing that, and will be something we need to be aware of as business owners. So within 2 meters, I definitely have a mask on. That's my I can't go away from my policy for my space really when I give that advice. Does it help?
It does. I think the biggest challenge is the younger generation have a more cavalier attitude towards these things.
Yeah.
And getting them to wear a mask is going to be quite difficult, I think. I think the older generation, there is no problem straight away. I talk anybody post 40 is very much, but I think the younger designers, the 25-year-olds, they want to be, they don't want to be wearing masks, and that's something I think is going to be hard. But the point I'm getting across to them is, you've got an older generation technician here that you need to do your job to make your sample, and if you get them poorly, they're not going to be able to do your designs, your work for you. So it's the way I would approach it, I think, is key to get them on side, to say you're not only protecting yourself, you're protecting somebody else, and it's that sharing of responsibility that I think is very important to get across.
I think I touched on that conversation between employer and employee now is going to be quite different. I always go back to the old seatbelt clunk click adverts, and the adverts that we showed quite horrific car accidents when people weren't, and we don't think twice now about wearing a seatbelt. I think of things like the drink driving campaigns, and drink driving became really taboo instead of being a sort of cavalier thing that you mentioned just now. And the same with the anti-smoking campaigns and the visions of lungs and things. So I think probably if I was training a workforce rather than just talking to my members, and I was doing the health and safety training now, I'd be showing them what it looks like for someone to be in an ITU, gasping for breath on a ventilator. I mean, I know it's shock tactics, but if you can't encourage them, you've got to kind of, shock them.
But I think part of the problem is the government wear a mask, don't wear a mask, and their fear of the lack of PPE that made them the decision not to. I spent several years living in Asia, and the moment someone's got a cold or a cough, they put a mask on straight away. It's the norm, it's the standard, and no one thinks twice of seeing someone. In the UK, we've got a mask, and there must be something wrong with you. We've just got to change that. I think masks have got to be used, and we've got to get it across to people.
Yeah, I think it'll come. I think as they lift some of the controls, like distancing and group meetings, they'll have to replace those controls with other controls to keep the infection down. So I think that's why they've started talking about masks. They've started talking about face coverings, because if they're going to lift one control, they have to replace it with another. And often the other one looks more officious, unoffensive to our British kind of way of life, the mask wearing. But if you want to meet someone, do it safely, or work with someone, do it safely, then it's a cross they have to bear, So I think we'll see more mask wearing, not less, personally. Yeah. Right. Anything else there? Can I move on?
Yeah, thank you. That's it for now, Tony. We'll carry on. Thank you.
Right. Oh, it's gone one over. I've given my next slide up, which is about. Right. This is quite a. How long have I got, Juliet? Just keep time for me now, because I'm a bit off kilter.
Okay. Well, we started at 2:15, so we've got another
10 minutes. Okay. This is quite a commonly used 5x5 system for risk assessment. I used it all the time when I was training police, and a lot of places use it. And there's 100 different sort of versions of it, but I just nicked this one off the internet and imposed on it the COVID thing. So the idea is that, if you're quarantining and there's a low number of infections in the population, then it's quite a low risk. But if you have no controls down the bottom of that side at all, and death is a consequence of COVID, then you're in a high risk area. So it's a commonly used 5x5. There's a 3x3 equally usable for really quick dynamic risk assessments. And this is really kind of the easiest thing to use. The RIDDOR reporting one, for those of you who know about RIDDOR, will often have things like near miss, no injury, and 3-day or more injury, and then serious injury and death. So it's just the same sliding scale as we have with COVID, really. And then our control mechanisms are down the side, and the probability changes with more controls that we put in. So I quite like these because they're colourful and they're simple for me to use. So being a simple creature. So this is the thing that we're talking about just now, the aerosol spray risk. And this is a detail that we don't get from our strategic risk assessments by the government. We've heard of some of it from some of the experts, the scientists in the room, but I quite like this visual. So at the moment we're at the 2-meter point, where large spray droplets will descend and not pass on to us if we're beyond 2 meters. Obviously, the further away are, the less likely that becomes. But a sneeze in an aisle in a supermarket can travel 6 meters. Yeah, that will take out the whole aisle. If someone's high viral load and infected and they sneeze, it can contaminate everybody in the aisle. That's why I wear my mask. I was aware of this. I don't think this was designed for COVID, this particular graphic, but I'd seen it before, and that's why I wear a mask. If I sneeze in an aisle and I'm infected, I can take out the aisle. So this comes back to the workplace situation where when or where or should we wear a mask, a face covering, and this is where I'm now. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but always worth bearing in mind. 2 meters. Oh, by the way, Denmark today, I hear, have gone down to 1 meter separation for their space anti-social distancing, I call it. Social distancing have gone down to 1 meter. Denmark have, and I'm assuming that's because they've decided their viral load in the community, that is the amount of infection out there and the strength of it, has reduced sufficiently for them to do that. I don't know, I haven't read the science on it yet. This is the other interesting slide. I would think that because I put it up here, but it's an early, this was an early assessment by the National Health Service, and it was talking about not just the aerosol droplet viability and how long it lasted in the on surfaces, but about the surface contamination. So we can look, stainless steel is 3 days, down to copper of 4 hours, and we know copper is quite a good thing to have. Copper seems to cure a lot of ailments and do a lot of good things for it. It's interesting this stuff only lasts on there for 4 hours, so it's got something in the copper metal that gets rid of a virus quite efficiently. And this is another workplace one, I think, for us, you know, about our cleaning regimes and about quarantine regimes. I'm hearing now as retailers are opening, they're going to quarantine some of them. They're going to quarantine their deliveries for 3 days. And some of the charity shops I've heard opening around here are saying we've got a 3-day storeroom now. After the 3 days, we're still going to wash it all, which they would have done before, but they're going to wash all the clothing and the stuff after the 3 days and sort of treat it with respect. So we've got to think about how we handle in quarantine our goods in and goods out to a certain extent, depending what materials are used to put it in. This is another one that's dynamic, changing all the time, is the demographic risks. So this was an early NHS advice around age groups and vulnerable underlying illnesses. But as we know now, we're hearing that, I heard this morning that communities from Asian communities are twice as likely to succumb to COVID than non-Asian than white communities. And we've already heard about the BAME communities and obesity being a factor in all communities. So this is something that's changing. The science is changing on it, and as employers, you know, we've got a duty to be aware of who's coming in and out of premises that's going to be there certainly for more than 15 minutes within 2 meters, and it's something I've written into the protocols again. Any questions on that one, or shall I skip on? I think I'll skip on to the next. If we have got any questions, yeah. Can we hold them to the end on that one? Yeah.
Yeah. Do that. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got lots of additional resources as business owners, lots of people to get information from. I've talked already about health and safety experts. If you know medical experts, my niece is an A&E doctor in Tooting. My daughter's a midwife, and my other niece is a nurse. I consider them medical experts. Whenever anything goes wrong in the house or to us, we consult them first. They're our first go-tos. Further reading, I'd recommend, you know, getting as much information as you can before you open. Professional bodies, of course, like Business Lincolnshire and other bodies and networks. Unions for those that have got employees that are unionised, or you might be unionised yourself. My partner's in a union, and she's getting up-to-date information on COVID and how to go back to work and what to expect from employers. They're a good source of up-to-date information. There can be a challenge if you're a business owner and you don't have a good relationship with your workforce or unions, but you know, I'd always ask them first. Peer group support, obviously, friends, colleagues, those in the same business, and of course your staff, your customers, and your visitors. Go for the feedback. Go for the feedback to inform. Everyone's, you know, no one's got a monopoly on good ideas, and they'll often give you tips that can help. So our business, Space 22, I'm a sole trader and I'm collaborating with other freelancers. So I've got a freelancer web guy, freelancer drone guy, freelancer marketeer who I'm collaborating at the moment with to stay busy and stay in business and stay open. We're a private members co-working space, so we don't have the problem of public coming in and out. We've got a locked door, and members will come in and out using their electronic keys. So we're COVID secure in that respect from members of the public. But we've written down the outcome of a risk assessment. It's a 2-page non-technical guide, which I'm willing to share with you all. If you email me after this, I'll send you the latest copy. It'll be a live document, as I said. It won't be a finished document, and it never will be around COVID. I think every business and every premises is going to have its own variations. As we heard, you know, there's a manufacturing and office sections together. I'm talking to a gym owner at the moment that's really, you know, concerned about opening the gym. They're struggling to see how they're going to do it and when they're going to do it. People like the hospitality industry have got all sorts of hurdles to cross, and everything's going to be different. Every premises, every business owner is going to have a slightly different slant on this, I think. Fatal virus is dynamic, absolutely, and yet to be conquered. And this is our own take on the dynamic risks we face at Space 22, and with my background in risk assessment and biohazard. So I think this is what you're going to get if you email me. A simple 2-pager, really non-technical, and it's talking to my members, and it'll change. And I think it's changed since I've written this now, insofar as the tracking and tracing regime has come in, and it wasn't in when I wrote this. So I'll send it to you anyway if you email me for a copy. And I think I'm on time. If there are any questions or any points that people like to make now's your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. We've got one question here from Kate. She's asking, how long should a dynamic risk assessment take?
Right, that's how long is a piece of string? That's a good question. Depends on the circumstances. As a cop, when your back was up against the wall and you were dealing with something unknown, then the level of the threat often determined how quickly you did the risk assessment. So it's normally quite quickly. But in this situation for COVID, if something changes in the community or with your workplace or whatever, I suggest you might not be able to freeze the manufacturing, or that you might not be able to freeze the process that's going on, but I suggest you pause, get together with, as I said, someone that knows about the risk, the business owner, and maybe a member of your workforce or a customer or someone to give you that critical friend approach, and take as long as you need. And it won't be long if the strategic guidance and the systematic guidance is already in place and fairly solid above you. It won't be long for you to come up with it. The other thing, pick up the phone to me or to one of the other health and safety people that you know, and we'll help too. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Tony. And unless anyone wants to put in one last question via the question pane or raise a hand with a question, I think that's bringing us to the end of the questions for today. Nope. Nothing in there. Okay. So in that case, I would just like to say thank you very much, Tony, for sharing your expertise with us today, and also thank you all for attending today's webinar. Once you leave the session, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could take the time to complete that and provide your feedback, including any suggestions of topics you may wish to see delivered in future webinars. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. Please do keep an eye on our website for the latest updates during this challenging time. And if you've not already done so, please subscribe to the weekly newsletter at www.businesslincolnshire.com. We have got a few more webinars coming up, and our next two available. We have one on Thursday on the 4th of June, and that's looking at marketing in a post-COVID-19 world. And then we have one the following Thursday, the 11th of June, and that one's attracting your ideal customers to your website, top SEO tips for business. You can book onto these via Business Lincolnshire website, as well as view a whole list of further webinars that are available to you there as well, if these topics are not ones that you're looking to get further information on. And these can all be found under the events menu on the website, Business Lincolnshire website. So finally, that just leaves me to say, on behalf of Business Lincolnshire and our presenter Tony today, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. Thank you.